We all kind of get handed the same career playbook, right?
Yeah.
It says, get the right degree, work hard, be loyal, and you will climb that ladder. It's sold as this simple, universal formula.
A one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. But the sources you shared with us, this whole collection of research and analysis, it tells a completely different story for a lot of
A
people.
much more complicated story.
Yeah, it shows that for so many Black women, the very structure underneath that promise is, well, it's deeply uneven, and it leads to these unequal outcomes, even with advanced degrees, immense effort. I mean, even when they do everything right.
Hmm.
Okay, let's unpack this deep dive on why that is.
I think it's so important to frame this conversation correctly right from the start. This deep dive, it isn't about individual ambition or, a lack of skill. We're focused squarely on the systemic barriers that are baked into that traditional career path.
Hmm.
When you really look at the data, and the sources are very clear on this, you see these compounding issues. They affect everything from your financial stability at the start all the way to promotion rates, and how your labor is valued at the end of your career,
So it's a whole life
the
cycle.
whole thing. So our mission here is really to go beyond just saying, yes, there's a problem, and to give some clarity on the specific mechanisms that create this uneven ladder.
Mhm.
We need to pinpoint exactly where the system breaks down.
Let's do that. Let's follow that path, starting right where the sources do, which is at the starting line.
Mm-hmm.
So, traditional career advice assumes you can invest in education, maybe take a lower paying job for a few years to get great experience. But the data shows Black women are entering that race with a much, much heavier education debt burden.
And that debt, it acts like an anchor. It
Yeah.
really is the first major hurdle, and it fundamentally delays building any kind of wealth.
It increases the risk of everything.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
think about the kind of financial flexibility it takes to say, you know what, I'll take that unpaid internship at the really high-profile firm.
Or the low salary startup job.
Exactly. The networking is fantastic, so I'll make it work. That debt it wipes that option off the table for so many.
So you're forced onto a different track from day one.
A different track entirely. One focused on just immediate survival, on paying down that debt. And in the process, you lose access to those high-leverage entry points that, frankly, others can afford to take.
And that compounding problem just keeps going with the pay gap. I mean, we're not talking about small amounts here.
Not at all.
The statistic that just jumps out is that Black women working full-time are paid only 66 cents for every dollar paid to white, non-Hispanic men.
And that's the full-time number.
Right.
It gets even worse when you factor in part-time work or employment gaps from, say, caregiving. What's really, it's frankly appalling, is when you calculate the lifetime cost of that.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about a smaller paycheck this week.
This is over a whole career.
Over a 40-year career, that gap translates into over $1 million in lost earnings in many states.
$1 million. That's not just a number. That feels like a theft of future security.
It is. It represents lost capacity.
Mhm.
This is money that would have been invested, compounded, used to buy a home, build equity, or just have a secure retirement.
It changes the entire economic story for a family.
It does. It guarantees a continuous deficit in wealth accumulation.
Right.
It's a foundational barrier that just never really goes away.
So you start with that financial hole. You're trying to pay off more debt with less income. But then you get into the corporate world, and the system doesn't just ask you to catch up.
It pulls the ladder away.
Yeah, it actively removes the track. Which brings us to what researchers call the broken rung. And this is where it gets really interesting. Even once you're in the door, the path just breaks.
The whole career path we're sold depends on that first big step, right? Going from being a professional contributor to being a manager.
That's the gateway.
It's the gateway to everything: higher salary, having a budget, being visible. And the research, especially from places like McKinsey, confirms this broken rung is a persistent, massive issue. And what's so essential for you to understand is the sheer size of the drop-off at this one specific point.
At that first promotion.
At that very first promotion, Black women experience the greatest drop in representation right there. The stat is for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 58 Black women are.
That's a huge crack in the foundation.
It's a chasm.
Okay, and if that wasn't bad enough, I saw a detail in the sources that honestly shocked me. It said promotion rates for Black women in 2024 have been described as regressing to earlier levels.
Mm-hmm.
Regressing? That means all the DEI efforts, the focus over the last few years, it hasn't just stalled, it's actually gone backwards. What are the sources saying is behind that?
Well, it looks like a combination of factors. First, you have the scaling back of DEI initiatives, after all the public scrutiny and legal challenges.
The backlash.
The backlash, yes. And second, you've got this really volatile corporate climate with constant layoffs. When companies get nervous and promotion criteria get fuzzy again, the default biases they creep back in. And they disproportionately hit women of color, especially at that first critical step into management.
So when that first rung is missing, you can see how everything else just falls apart.
It's a domino effect.
You don't get the chance to manage a budget or lead a team. And that's the exact experience you need to even be considered for a VP or C-suite role later on.
And it's not just about the title. They also get fewer of those really high visibility assignments.
The ones tied directly to the CEO's pet project.
Exactly. Or to revenue.
Yeah.
Which means they get smaller raises, smaller bonuses. And then there's the sponsorship issue. If fewer Black women get into senior roles, there's just a thinner bench of people with the political capital to pull others up behind them.
Which leads us right into the third big challenge here, which is the evaluation process itself. The whole idea of merit.
Right.
The materials you shared really highlight that merit is not some neutral concept. It's what they call the merit trap.
This is where we get into intersectional discrimination. And it's so crucial to get this right. It's not just, racism plus sexism.
It's something new.
It's compounded. It creates a unique set of stereotypes and biases that are specific to being a Black woman. Things a Black man or white woman might not face in the same way.
Yeah.
And the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they actually recognize this. They explicitly say that this kind of intersectional harassment is covered under both race and sex discrimination law.
So if the legal framework gets it, why doesn't the corporate world?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
So how does this actually show up, day to day? This is where you can really see what people are experiencing. The sources give a pretty clear list. You have those prove it again cycles where you have to constantly reestablish your credibility even after you've had huge successes.
Exhausting.
And you face this incredibly narrow range of what's seen as an acceptable leadership style.
The tightrope.
Totally. You're forced into this impossible choice. Either you're seen as too aggressive, the angry Black woman stereotype if you're direct, or you're just dismissed as incompetent if you use a softer approach. There's no room for the kind of professional assertiveness that, say, white male colleagues get to have.
And when mistakes happen, and they always happen, we're all human. Black women just get fewer second chances. For others, it's a learning opportunity. For them, it's proof of a deficit.
Right. And then there's the office housework. Let's define that because it's such a huge career drain.
It is. This is all the low value, but high energy, emotional, and admin labor.
Like planning the office party.
Planning the party, serving on endless DEI committees, being the default person to onboard new hires, or smoothing over tensions between other colleagues.
All the stuff that makes the office run.
Essential stuff for the culture, but it gives you zero credit towards a promotion. It just eats up the time and energy that your peers are putting into those high visibility revenue generating projects. It's a perfect recipe for stagnation.
And if we pull the lens back even further, none of this is actually new. It has really deep historical roots.
Absolutely.
I mean, historically, Black women were funneled into labor that the economy just treated as less valuable. Domestic work, caregiving.
And crucially, this wasn't an accident. Policy choices were made to reinforce that undervaluation.
Like in the New Deal.
Exactly. Look at the New Deal in the 1930s. The huge foundational labor protections like Social Security, the National Labor Relations Act, they initially excluded agricultural and domestic workers.
Which was a massive portion of the Black workforce at the time.
A disproportionate number, yes. By leaving them out of that federal safety net, the government basically cemented the idea that the labor of Black women was disposable and low value. It reinforced an economic hierarchy that was already built into the system.
And you can see the echo of that today.
Yeah. Profound echo.
Caregiving and service jobs are still completely essential to our economy. But they're also still the ones that are often lower paid, have fewer benefits, are more physically demanding, and have the most unstable schedules.
So we're still paying the least for the most foundational work. And that continues to limit the economic mobility for the people who do it.
Okay, so if we put it all together, the system pays Black women less, it blocks their first key promotion, it penalizes their mistakes more harshly, and it clusters them into work that is systematically undervalued.
That's a pretty good summary of the failure.
And now you add on top of that this current mood of, volatility and cutbacks to support programs. The sources make it clear that relying on your employer to invest in you is becoming an inherently risky bet.
A very risky bet.
So let's pivot here. Because the sources don't just diagnose the problem, they also offer some really sharp strategies for getting around these barriers.
Hmm.
So what does all this mean for someone who's actually trying to navigate this? If the traditional ladder is broken, what are the moves you can make?
I think the biggest mindset shift that the sources encourage is moving from building passive loyalty to building active leverage.
Loyalty versus leverage. What's the difference?
Loyalty is when you hope the company rewards your hard work. Leverage is when the company has to reward your work because replacing you would be too difficult or too expensive.
Ah, okay.
So this means you have to focus your energy on roles and skills that have clear, measurable outcomes. Things tied to the bottom line.
Like revenue generation.
Revenue generation, documented cost savings, critical compliance work, or in-demand tech skills. These are things that are much harder for a manager to ignore or discount in a review.
That focus on leverage also seems to lead to what they call a two-track strategy.
Yeah, yes.
This is all about reducing your dependence on that one single biased employer. The advice is basically keep your day job for the stability and the benefits, but at the same time, build an external income asset.
It's about creating options.
Right. It could be consulting on the side, developing a digital product, real estate, a service business. Whatever it is, the goal is to create financial insurance. And maybe more importantly, a credible reason to walk away.
Your leverage goes up 1,000% when you can actually afford to leave.
Exactly.
And when you're looking for employers, you have to be just as strategic. You should be targeting companies that offer real, concrete ways to mitigate these problems.
Like what? What should you look for?
Look for transparency. Companies with clear pay bands, with published promotion criteria that they actually stick to, and a documented commitment to helping people move internally. If the process is a black box, it's a breeding ground for bias.
And the sources make this really crucial distinction between a mentor and a sponsor.
Life-changing distinction, yes.
Mentors give you advice, they're great. But sponsors are the ones who use their political capital for you.
They put skin in the game.
Right. They're the ones putting your name forward for stretch roles, championing you in meetings you're not in, and taking a real professional risk on your behalf. You need their capital, not just their advice.
But that's what gets you past that broken rung. And the final piece is you have to use the tools that are becoming available, like pay transparency and negotiation.
Even though the gap is structural.
Right. Negotiation alone won't solve it.
Okay.
But actively looking up salary data, practicing how you talk about compensation, it reduces the space for that quiet underpayment that creates the lifetime loss of earnings. The more you know, the harder it is for the system to hide.
So we've covered a lot of ground. It's clear the traditional career path fails Black women, not because of a lack of skill, but because the system pulls away support right where it matters most. Sponsorship, clear criteria, financial flexibility. The failure is systemic, it's predictable, and it's incredibly costly.
Which leaves us with a really important final question for you, the listener, to think about. Given everything we've talked about, the backsliding on promotions, the general volatility, you have to ask yourself, if traditional workplace loyalty is failing, how should you redefine retirement security or even career satisfaction when depending on that single bias ladder is just so risky?
What's the alternative?
The sources seem to suggest the answer lies in prioritizing your own external leverage and your own diversified income far, far above any sense of institutional loyalty.
That is a powerful challenge to end on. Thank you for sharing these resources with us. We really encourage everyone to keep exploring them, and we'll see you next time.